Good evening, everyone. I'm really pleased that we are able to connect through Zoom with Canadian Owen Laukkanen, who's been to see us many times, but of course was frustrated in that opportunity this year because the border is closed. Anyway, Zoom allows us at least to connect with him. Hi, Owen.
Hi, Barbara. Thanks so much for having me.
It's really a pleasure. I miss you because, we had a
Yeah,
run there of, gosh, you must have been here like 6 times in a row or something, and then
6 or 7 times. Yeah, I've been missing Scottsdale, been missing the Poison Pen. It's really nice to see the store and to see you even just virtually.
well, thank you. So I looked up some background on Owen, which I could read off this. It's always fun to learn things about a writer that you didn't previously know. So when he graduated from college and finding work was a challenge, Owen even applied to work as the driver for an escort agency, thinking it might prove interesting material for a novel. Did you actually put it to use?
I mean, I never got the job, but I thought, I was probably 23. I was kind of a skinny, bespectacled guy. I wasn't the kind of guy that you'd really want walking in providing protection for escorts. But I thought, hey, I have a car, and it would be a fascinating, you know, experience as a writer. I can't believe you found that. That's such a
So
funny.
is that sort of a version of Uber where you provide extra service?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like you do the security and you kind of drive them to their dates, and just so there's a guy there to protect or just be there as a sidearm. So I thought,
Why
I
not?
mean, I was applying to everything. I applied to warehouses and more fishing boats, and then the poker job. But that came up on Craigslist, and I thought, well, why not?
So your poker job was actually very cool because you did that, as I understand it, reporting on the World Series of Poker, and you jet setted around the world for 3 years, visiting cool places like Macau and Monaco, where they play cards for real money.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I mean, like I said, I was 23. I'd never left North America, and this paid me just a crazy amount of money to travel 3 weeks of every month to wherever I wanted to go in the world. So, South America, Europe, Australia, Asia, anywhere that there was a poker game, I could essentially just say I want a ticket here, and they would send me, and I would, get to write whatever I wanted about these people playing poker, which was just a fascinating, life changing experience for someone in his early 20s who lived a pretty sheltered life to that point.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm amazed at how much money there is in poker. It's become a real sport. I edited an author who has almost become a professional poker player. She's had all kinds of winnings. And
Oh, no kidding.
yeah, Jane Stanton Hitchcock has written this wonderful novel called Bluff, which she structured the mystery like a poker hand. But she
Wow,
plays.
that's very cool.
Yeah, she plays very seriously, and I didn't know until I talked to her just what a big deal it was, and as I say, how much
It's
money is in it.
Yeah, I was shocked, and it's taken me a long time to get over the sense of just kind of unreal amount of money there was. You'd see in Europe, you'd see 19-year-old kids with $40,000 Rolexes on, and people with just the craziest cars, people losing hundreds of thousands of euros in a night and not being swayed by it. It was really just really fascinating, and really the people that it attracted, doctors and lawyers and physicists and engineers who just given up on, or decided to play cards for a living instead of taking their professional ways. Just the brain power in these rooms and the money in these rooms was just mind-boggling.
Well, I can see that these attempts at work actually were very good training for a person who wanted to write a crime novel. So when you wrote The Professionals, did you intend it to be a crime novel from the beginning because you had a guy working for Minnesota, what is it, Bureau of Investigation?
Criminal apprehension.
Right, criminal
CA.
is the thing John Sanford put Lucas Davenport
Yeah.
into, and then he's got a black female FBI partner, sort of, right? Or is it the other
Right,
way around?
Carla Windermere. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would seem like you must have intended to write a crime novel if these were your two protagonists.
I mean, I had intended to write a single novel, but not necessarily a series. I'd intended for the bad guys to be my main characters, the four kidnappers, these kind of nomadic 20-somethings who couldn't find jobs. It was 2008, 2009 when I wrote it, and the economy had cratered. So, my friends, I remember some of my friends in poker, their banks going bankrupt. And so these characters were based on my good friends, and they were really the protagonists of the book. And then, obviously every criminal needs a foil, and so I needed police to chase these bad guys, and it just so happened that they were in Minnesota when the police cottoned on as the book unfolded. And so I had never read John Sanford stuff. I knew nothing about Lucas Davenport or the BCA. I probably would have asked for permission to tread on such hallowed ground if I'd known. But so it became this BCA agent and an FBI agent who then, when we got to the end of the book and showed it to the publishers, they wanted a series based on these cops. And I thought, well, geez, now I really have to, brush up on what law enforcement in Minnesota is like, because really it was just a kind of tale of my friends committing crimes across the country. And to be able to go back and then delve into these characters, the Stevens and Windermere, both cops, and build them out from what had essentially just been, like I said, foils, was quite rewarding.
I can imagine that it would be, and you ended up writing 6 of them. You'll be glad to know that Lucas Davenport has moved on to become a U.S. Marshal. So,
I've heard that, yeah.
He didn't stay in the BCA, and I didn't think that John had any kind of, trademark on the BCA.
No, and I mean, to the contrary, John was nothing but kind to me as a rookie writer. I mean, him, he's just a wonderful gentleman, a really kind, generous guy, and every opportunity that we've had to interact, he's been nothing but gracious and kind to me. So if there were any hard feelings, he obviously hid them well, but I don't think he felt threatened by my BCA characters.
No, John's one of the most competitive people I know, but I would not say that he feels threatened. Not at all. So then you wrote a book which I truly loved, which was based in part on your own family's seafaring history, and it's a book about marine salvage. But more than that, do I remember it right that this was a book in which the people had to go down the Columbia and cross the bar? Or am I imagining that?
Yeah, no, they do have to do that at the very beginning with the broken tugboat, one engine busted and a freighter bearing down on them, and that bar at Astoria on the Columbia River is one of the most notoriously just deadly and harrowing places to take a ship. So yeah, that was at the beginning of the book.
So that's a book called Gale Force, do I have it right?
Gale Force, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a terrific one-off pulse-pounding thriller, but one of the reasons I liked it, Owen, is that we actually sailed down the Columbia from Portland to Astoria. And when we got to the bar, they only let the river ships go so far towards it because it's so wildly dangerous. They're not allowed to cross the bar and go into the ocean, but they told us all kinds of stories about, the shipwrecks and the salvage, and I just didn't realize what a really rough band of water it was.
Yeah, even for big ships, it's just, I mean, the videos of the Coast Guard lifeboats that go out there when no one else can go out, and the waves are just crashing over them, and these boats are just completely submerged and then popping up again and venturing out to save lives. It's just, I remember hearing stories of mariners crossing that bar, when I was fishing up here in BC, and people just talking about it like it was the gates of hell almost. So it's, yeah, had to throw that in there.
Of course you did. It's a really wonderful book. Owen published it in 2018, and if you can find a copy of Gale Force, I really recommend it to you because it stands alone. You don't have to have read anything else. So in 2019, you presented us with Deception Cove. And now you've moved to the Olympic Peninsula. Should I ask why you're not setting any books in Canada?
Well, that's a good question. And when it's asked by Canadians, it's usually asked with a certain tone because sometimes Canadian readers get mad that you don't set books in your home country. But there's a few reasons. The primary one is simply money, and that's, with the exception of Louise Penny, it's hard to name many Canadian crime writers who have had success writing about Canada with an American audience. And to be an artist successfully in Canada, you really need to appeal to the American audience. So I think setting books in America kind of broadens my potential audience. I've also spent quite a bit of time in America. I grew up very close to Detroit, Michigan. And a lot of the culture that we consume in Canada is American. So I don't, I also kind of set my books in Minnesota or the Olympic Peninsula, just on the border, so I can, kind of fudge it a little bit. But yeah, it's funny when Americans ask that question, it's usually kind of guileless and innocent. But when Canadians ask if there's an ulterior motive, like, why have you turned your back on our country? And the fact is that you just can't make a living writing about Canada. There are so many talented Canadian crime writers, many of whom no doubt you stock in your store. And I'm sure that, by and large, they don't really fly off the shelves, even with Canadian readers, because we're kind of the little brother to you guys. And so we look to Americans to tell us what's worth consuming.
Well, we had a wonderful event with Robert Povey, who's from Toronto, and his editor, and I asked him the same question, because I think that his two books with Dr. Lucas Page, City of Windows, and then I'm trying to remember, Patrick said Under Pressure. Under Pressure. I think they're just fabulous, but they're both set in New York City. I think the Canadian writer that I really like, who does set books at least partly in Canada, is Ian Hamilton. Ava Lee and her mother, their home base is Toronto, the very large Chinese community there, but Ava Lee is mostly off going around the world, primarily Asia.
She is.
I love those books. She's a forensic accountant, and there's something about the way Ian can take you through a complicated financial transaction and fraud that frankly would just bore me silly sometime, but Ian manages to make it really compelling.
He's very good, and she's kind of like a neo James Bond type character, where you get the lifestyle, you get the fancy hotels and just the glamour, and then you get, as you say, these really kind of compelling plots that I don't think would be as compelling when told by another writer, because he just has this knack of making things interesting that probably, if I tried to tell it, would be very dry. He has one of those books was a poker book that I thought was really good, about a famous poker scam. So yeah, I think he's a very talented writer. I dig those books a lot.
I like them too. This is the Ava Lee series by Ian Hamilton, and basically, if you like police procedurals, you would also like Ava Lee, because you get to go through the whole investigation. Anyway, let's talk about Deception Cove, and now the new book, which is called Lonejack Trail. Is this a mythical county or a real county on the Olympic Peninsula where your characters are living?
It's mythical. I was kind of inspired by Ace Atkins' Quinn Colson books, because I think that he's kind of carved out a mythical county in Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken. And I thought, what a fun way to. I wanted to kind of write the Pacific Northwest in the same way that he writes Mississippi, or that some Southern writers write the South, in a way where the geography is important to the book. But I also wanted to have, kind of a playbox for myself, or a sandbox for myself, where I could take liberties and not be too bound by the specifics. So yeah, so Macaw County is a tiny fictional county that I've carved out of the Olympic Peninsula. Probably too small in real life to be a county. There's only 2 or 3 little towns in it, but for my purposes, it serves me quite well.
So it's not on the water, right? It's a bit inland.
It's on the water. It's right at the Cape. So it's on the Strait of Juan de Fuca on one side and the Pacific on the other, and then Cape Flattery is right at like the farthest westernmost point of the United States is right at the center of it. So it's probably the most scenic and famous part of Clallam County, which is the county that is actually there, but I've stolen it for myself.
Why not? So you've populated this series. You again have a male and female pair. So tell us about your veteran. She's a former what, Marine?
She's a former Marine. She was part of what's called the Female Engagement Team, which was a Marine program where they, it used to be, and I'm not sure if it still is, but the Marine Corps wouldn't let women fight on the front lines, wouldn't let them see combat, unless they were a part of these female engagement teams whose job was to go in on the front lines and try to liaise with local women to try to kind of glean information from, that the women wouldn't tell male soldiers, or that wouldn't, otherwise be available to the Marine Corps, to the military. So she's part of one of these teams in Afghanistan, and she sees heavy combat and winds up with kind of PTSD from it, and comes back to McCaw County to find that her husband has died under mysterious circumstances. He was probably into some kind of nefarious things, and she's been kind of given this companion animal, Lucy, the dog, to help her with her PTSD as she, tries to kind of build her life up again. And the beginning of the book is Lucy being taken from her by these kind of nefarious elements in McCaw County.
Is Lucy a service dog? I know she's a therapy dog at this point, but was she too a veteran?
My Lucy, or the Lucy in the
No, the Lucy in the book. Although I know that you named the Lucy in the book after your own dog.
Yeah. Lucy she's a companion animal, so she did the training in the book. She's trained in the prison, and then she and Jess do like a week or two of, or a month of training on another, on a ranch inland in eastern Washington. So she's a full-on kind of therapy dog, and she's trained to notice when Jess is exhibiting signs of PTSD and when she's starting to have an episode, and her job is essentially to just kind of come and nuzzle up to Jess and lick her face and just take her out of her own head and into this place where, she can care for the dog and see that the dog cares for her and is not just bound by her bad memories.
I think Lucy is a wonderful character. But I ask because in some other books, the dog has come home from combat with whoever the veteran is, and so it's a military dog that has now been discharged for one reason or another, and then becomes a companion or therapy dog. But I thought that I remembered that Lucy didn't do that she was actually trained for this job here in the States.
Yeah, she is rescued from a dogfighting ring in Michigan and brought to the prison where my male protagonist, Mason Burke, is serving a 15-year sentence. And as part of kind of a program where they bring dogs into the prison so that the prisoners can train them, and it's kind of good for both the dogs and the prisoners. These are real-life programs that I find really fascinating and heartwarming, this idea that, you can kind of rehabilitate the human being and these neglected dogs. And so Lucy's one of these dogs. She's the runt of the litter, and Mason kind of gradually trains her into, a capable dog who's able to go off and be a service dog. And so from there, when he gets out of prison, decides to look Lucy up just to see how she's doing, because she's made just such an impact on him, and finds out that Lucy's gotten into trouble, thousands of miles away on the Pacific coast, where he's in Michigan trying to decide what to do with his life after being in prison for so long.
So this is your way of bringing them together. You connect Jess, the vet, and Mason, the ex-con, through the dog. And putting the dog in danger is a pretty powerful incentive. So that was Deception Cove. Where are we now with Lone Jack Trail? Because it has a wonderful opening scene.
Yeah, well, thank you. It was kind of, I set out for this book to be the start of a series, for Deception Cove to be the start of a series, but I wanted to make sure that every book kind of had a value on its own, and wasn't just, this year's Lucy book or this year's Winslow Burke book. I wanted to be able to tell a story that was just as compelling as I found Deception Cove to be. So in this book, the body of a, kind of disgraced former hockey star washes up on the beach in Deception Cove, and he's been murdered. And it turns out that he had gone to jail for running a dogfighting ring, and that days before he died, Mason Burke was seen fighting with him in town. And so naturally, he served time for murder already. He's the prime suspect. And Jess has just been drafted on as a deputy in McCaw County. And so her kind of job is to help investigate this murder, and all signs point to Burke. So I wanted, even as Burke and Jess had become close throughout Deception Cove, I wanted to find a way to put a wedge between them again and keep the stakes high on that front, because I think, with a lot of stories, a lot of serial stories, once the two leads get together, you lose a lot of the dramatic tension. So this book is about, Jess trying to come to terms with whether she's on Burke's side or the deputy's side, and Burke trying to decide whether to kind of stay in McCaw and clear his name, or just run because no one really has his back.
Right, that's a very difficult situation. I think the hockey player, Bad Boyd, is a very interesting character. It would, he had hit the high life, and then, like many athletes, something disrupts it. Not all of them get to retire in full time with glory.
Right.
Many of them are injured, or increasingly, they're subject to being let go for bad behavior, or social media idiocy, or domestic abuse, or whatever you want. So anyway, these guys who are used to a high profile and a lot of easy money, I shouldn't say easy money, but big money would be fair.
Big money, yeah.
To get derailed from that would be a difficult thing to deal with. So he comes back here to this little place, and he's a jerk. He picks on Lucy. That's how Burke gets into a fight with him. But, did you have some sympathy with him? Because that is a hard thing to happen to you if you're a professional athlete that suddenly loses all that, and you don't know where to go with your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have had more sympathy if it wasn't for the dog fighting thing. He was kind of. Pardon?
I said you're the one who gave him that. So.
No, exactly. I know, because I wanted Burke to have. I wanted the reader to think, well, maybe Burke did kill him for at least a few pages, because Burke's been in jail for murder. Dogfighting is something that he's not going to stand for, especially with Lucy being around. So I needed Boyd to have a crime that would maybe let the reader take Burke's side if he was a killer, kind of raise that question in his mind. I think you're 100% right that it would be very tough as someone who'd lived a high life, as an athlete who'd been, kind of everyone's hero, to have to kind of slink back home. But I think with Boyd, he comes home still kind of cocksure and swaggering and feeling like, if nowhere else in the world, he still owns McCaw County. It's still his place to do what he wants. You can see by the way that he treats, some of the women in the county, that he's definitely still got that sense of entitlement, and that sense that he hasn't really lost anything, or doesn't necessarily feel much remorse for what he's done. He's still that guy.
Well, he's an obvious guy to have killed. I mean, I always think it's interesting when you're writing a book, to what degree do you want to create sympathy or empathy for the victim? Because victims are in books to be killed, for one reason or another. And we're supposed to feel and do feel bad when it's a perfectly innocent person. But if it's a perfectly innocent person, then trying to construct a story around a perfectly innocent person who's killed is a little difficult. So what you really wanted to have is some kind of a history, a backstory, whatever, that made them a target, set them up to be killed.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line between making them like a cartoon evil guy and, making them somebody you really mourn. So I thought Boyd was an interesting mix of that. He had some good things and some bad things. And you had to
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I felt badly that a life, like his was cut short too soon, in terms of certainly his professional athlete, and the effect that that would have. But that doesn't excuse him from the kind of behavior that that he exhibits, and probably exhibited when he was a successful professional athlete.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you kind of see later on in the book that he was always a bit of a, or kind of a sociopath, or somebody who was. I mean, the way that he treats Levi, not to kind of give anything away, but through the book, he's kind of shown to be not the nicest guy. But I would definitely agree that I think as crime writers, it kind of behooves us to treat every life on the page as we would every life, in real life. Where I kind of have trouble with books in the genre is when just kind of hundreds of people, or people just die willy-nilly, and there's no kind of pause given to acknowledge that every life lost is a tragedy, and that everything that happens in this book would have major real-life consequences for the people involved. And I feel like I've always tried as a writer to make my bad guys empathetic as much as I could, and my good guys not 100% good. And in the case of victims, yeah, you really don't want that lily white, flawless victim who's just kind of essentially a symbol of good. You want real people who might have walked themselves into these situations, but still under no circumstances deserve to die for them. I think that's what makes a compelling read.
Well, I agree with you. You have an additional problem when you're writing about a little place like Macao County with not a lot of people in it. You got to work out, how many people you can kill in a place like that. And so bringing him back is a good way, to solve that problem. Otherwise, you're going to lower the population to the point where the sheriff's department won't have any function.
Right. Yeah. I mean, or any need to function. It'll just be an abandoned county. But I think Macau County is one of those places where, you probably hit a certain age and you leave, and then, you come back after you've seen the world, or you come back maybe with your tail between your legs, you come back to retire. But it's one of those places where people are at a young age are probably eager to leave, and then, the people who stick around are either unable to leave or just have decided that's where they want to be. But it definitely is quite a small county, and that's probably why Jess gets a job with the sheriff's department, because in the first book, most of the Deception Cove detachment is implicated in these schemes. So really, there's just a body shortage in the sheriff's department.
Very true. Now, in Before, with a capital B, was there much in the way of tourism?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think there's still tourism right now is the primary economic driving force in Clallam County and in fictional Macau County, hiking and seeing the beaches and stuff. I think before, fishing was the primary economic driver, and as the kind of fishery stocks have dried up, which is a subject that's close to my heart, as coming from a family of commercial fishermen, as they've dried up, so too have the fortunes of the county, and people have turned to crime where they can't, attract tourists.
Right, but I was thinking, if you're going to write several books set there, that an influx of outsiders, tourists or fishermen or whatever, gives you a population where you can kill people, and it is not.
That's true.
Unrealistic. Yeah. So that's why I was asking. So because of the pandemic and the large abandon of tourism, are you just going? We've talked to many writers about this. Are you going to write around it? Are you going to write before it, or are you just going to skip over until after it? And what role, if any, is it going to play in your books?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've been working on something completely unrelated, and it's anytime anyone's in a restaurant or a nightclub or anything, I've been just flinching and cringing at the closeness. But I'm going to sit down and start writing a new Winslow and Burke book now, and I haven't decided what I'm going to do about the pandemic situation. I mean, you can't obviously ignore it, I don't think, but I I think that I'm going to send Winslow and Burke out of Macaw County for a spell of it, but into kind of a similarly rural environment. So hopefully just with wide open space, I won't have to make too much acknowledgement of it. But yeah, that's a real, I mean, I don't know what you do. We don't want to all be writing books about crime during pandemics or during the pandemic.
No, and the thing is, by the time you write this book and it gets to publication, we may well have moved into such a different way of coping with the pandemic that you would date your book hopelessly, because it's impossible to tell how it's going to go. So most of the writers we've talked to are not directly writing it. You know, it might be a whisper in the background or something, or they're just still in before or moving on to after. And you know, I think if you're starting now, you're not looking for a publication date. I mean, realistically, not till at least this time in 2021, or you know, could be even a little bit later. By which time, anything that you were to put into it now is likely to be, as I say,
completely outdated.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask Patrick, do we have any questions over there?
Yeah, there are a few.
Patrick is looking at the Facebook questions, so
let's
step up here.
Nice.
All right. Let's see. Okay. Hey, Owen, by the way, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you doing, Patrick?
Doing great. We miss seeing you out here.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay, Ashley asks, unsure if this is okay to ask, but when you're writing bad guy characters, where do you draw inspiration from, or where do you look for inspiration when researching these characters? You don't have to go far, do you?
No, I mean not terribly far. I mean, with the case of Bad Boyd, he was kind of drawn on the Michael Vick, you know,
of course
story.
He was. Yeah, I was going to ask you
dog
that,
fighting.
Right.
That's the pretty obvious one. I think a lot of the times I will draw from the news or from, you know, characters, from people, real life events in the news. I also, you know, in Forgotten Girls, for instance, my last Stevenson Winterberry book, it was based on a famous serial killer who operated in my neighborhood for decades and murdered, you know, literally 50 women in my neighborhood. And so that was kind of a fascinating dive into, you know, I mean, to be honest, the women in that story were far more compelling to me than the bad guy. I felt like the bad guy was, you know, got far too much press. He was just kind of a nut. But yeah, I think I just try to, luckily I haven't experienced too much evil in my day-to-day life or in real life. So I, you know, read the news a lot, read stories of real life and try to draw inspiration from those people, and then try to kind of look for what makes the quote bad guy or girl a human being, as opposed to you know, just the one-note psychopath.
Right. Okay. Eric asks, and you've talked about this a little bit already, but can you tell us a little bit more about what inspired Lone Jack Trail? He says, I love the aspect of a hometown celebrity who fell from grace. Yeah,
that's really what it is the, you know, the prodigal son gone off and then returned in shame, and again, it was kind of this idea that I wanted something that would drive a wedge between Mason and Jess, with Lucy at the center of it, and this idea that Burke may or may not have you know, murdered this disgraced dog fighter was really the wedge. And then I wanted Jess to also be kind of grappling with, or continuing to grapple with, you know, what she dealt with in the past, and for Burke to now be kind of grappling with what happened in Deception Cove, because he spent you know, 15 years of his life in prison preparing to be essentially just a decent, normal human being, and when Deception Cove begins, he's trying to set that plan into motion. You know, he's got a roadmap for how he wants to live his life. When I was writing him, or when I do write him, if I come to a kind of conundrum point, my thing with him is always that he'll do what is decent, or what is, you know, kind of most honorable, even if it is not the best for him. So he's not going to lie. He's not going to kind of try to scam anyone. He's not going to cloud his past. He's going to be upfront and open about who he is, and just let the chips fall where they may. And that's really good in theory, but in practice, obviously, when you're dealing with criminals and people who think you're a criminal, it can be tough. So I wanted Burke to then, be kind of trying to deal with what happens in Deception Cove and with how the community sees him, and being faced with these opportunities to maybe lie or fudge the truth in a way that will help him with regards to Bad Boyd's murder, but being still trying to be committed to being this person that he planned to be, and kind of redeeming himself that way. So it was essentially just trying to drive a wedge between them again, and not have it just being Burke and Jess against the world from the start.
All right. Ken asks, he says, I see the potential for a poker book. Plenty of casinos in the Pacific Northwest. Have you considered that?
It's funny, I have considered a poker book, and the first crime novel that I ever wrote was a kind of Raymond Chandler-esque poker novel set in Vegas, and that's how I found my agent way back in 2009. But that book won't ever see the light of day, and shouldn't. I think I didn't want to be kind of pigeonholed into just being the guy who wrote about poker. I think that right now I'd like to go back to it. I actually started writing. I write young adult fiction on the side, and so I started writing this book, from a kind of younger adult's perspective, a girl who's a math whiz and hacks onto her brother's online poker account and starts winning a bunch of money, and then loses it all, and it involves her kind of traveling around Europe and Asia, where the gambling age is 18, so she can get into casinos and gamble, and because like Ken said, the opportunity for stories in the poker world is just beyond compare. The characters are so fascinating, so varied, and just the opportunity for crime and nefarious things is unparalleled. The real life stories from poker are fascinating, and I thought once of writing just a memoir of the things that I saw in my 3 years on the poker trail. But yeah, I definitely would like to go back to poker now that I've put some distance in between, and now that I've kind of established myself as not just the guy who writes books set in casino.
Okay, Lynn asks, are there any film or TV nibbles on any of your books?
Hi Lynn. Yeah, actually I have The Professionals is optioned right now, which is good. It's been optioned off and on since it came out, but you always remain hopeful. And then I have a young adult book coming out next year called The Wild, which is based on the real life story of a friend of mine who, as a teenager, got into some kind of serious bad behavior, such that her parents paid to have her kidnapped and brought to the wilds of Utah and marched around in the desert with a bunch of other bad kids in Utah for 3 months as a kind of rehabilitation exercise, which didn't work for her. It took her some time after that to A, forgive her parents, and B, kind of get on stable footing, but struck me as just a fascinating idea for a story, with these kind of bad kids, 8 or 10 bad kids, the 2 counselors just being marched for weeks on end through forbidding terrain. And so I thought I'd write a book about that, kind of a Lord of the Flies, Hunger Games type idea. And so that has been picked up by HBO Max, with a director named Patrick Bryce attached, and producers attached, and kind of go for takeoff. So pretty excited about that. I've never had the big splashy announcement in the trades before, and we got that. So, and we have screenwriting going on and a lot of momentum. So I'm really stoked to see what transpires there. It's neat because Patrick Bryce, the director, grew up next to one of these wilderness rehabilitation sites in Northern California. So he has his own take on it. And then one of the producers, his brother, was sent to one of these experiences and actually had a good time, and it changed his life. So just I think we've got a good team together, and I think it'll be a really neat translation from page to screen.
That is exciting. I had a rebellious teenage stepson that we sent to Outward Bound, which is one of
Okay.
the wilderness rehabilitation programs, and alas, it didn't work for him. But I did think the concept of it is quite interesting, and they have them in different parts of the country. You know, you can be in Appalachia, you can be in, I think, Minnesota, you know, out west. They're not all
Yeah, yeah.
they're not all in the Utah desert by a long shot.
No, I set mine in the Pacific Northwest because that's what I know. And I do a lot of hiking and camping here. So for me, that kind of thing sounds amazingly cool and it's very fun. But I think, you know, if you're, you know, kind of a city dweller who's not used to hiking, you know, 20 miles a day, it's probably a harsh slap in the face. And for some kids, it really works, and for others, it probably takes a bit more.
Right. Hopefully it's not actually harmful, but it doesn't. Their success rate is certainly not, you know, not 100%. This is such a wonderful time for television. You know, it's a wonderful time to be a writer and have your work picked up for serial television. I can't even count the number of streaming services there are anymore. You know, there's such an enormous menu of them, and they're all looking to commission work. So it's hard to go wrong right now as a writer.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really kind of a boom time for anyone who's creating content and getting it out there because, like you say, these streaming services are really hungry for content. I don't know how long it'll last. I don't think that someone recently kind of compared Netflix to America Online as the kind of foot in the door, but then kind of failed afterwards. But you know, we'll see where these things go. But for now, you know, there's plenty of opportunities, and it's really, I feel really fortunate to have you know, latched on to such a good team and have done it in such a great time.
Yeah, timing is everything. That's for sure.
It is.
Right,
Yeah.
and you know, it's just like doing these virtual events. You know, because there isn't any other way to do them right now, and people are at home with more time to watch. But will that carry over when people can get out more? You know, there's so many unknowns involved in this. So all we can do, what do we say, Patrick? We can look maybe 2 weeks ahead.
Yeah.
You know, seriously, you know, as a business, that's about as far ahead as we seem to be able to go because things change. I wrote a long newsletter today for some of our customers, and by the time I finished it, there were actually 2 entries that had changed
Really?
while it was being formatted. We sold out of one book and another book arrived, and it was like, if I can't if I can't even get a grip on that, then it's just constant change, and
For sure.
and you know, exploring what will work right now while people are largely in their own homes. But will people stay in their own homes for entertainment when they can get out again is a whole different question. You know, will movie theaters survive? What will happen? Will we actually see people back in the bookstore? You know, who knows? But here we are.
Yeah. It's like you were saying about even just about writing for a year in advance. Definitely, I would imagine that planning a business model for the future is just as fraught. I think, like personally, I probably will take a while before I'm willing to go back into restaurants and movie theaters. But I will say that as soon as the borders open and they give me the opportunity to come down to Scottsdale, I'd love to come back to the store. So
Wonderful. Well, we will.
you'll never keep me out of a bookstore.
I hope not. I do think that they're improving testing, and you know, it's way too soon to feel comfortable with a vaccine, but I think that reasonably we can expect one. I'm a child of polio, and there was no real expectation when I was very young, and we couldn't go to the beach, and we couldn't do a lot of things in the summer, that there would be a protection. And then Dr. Salk came along, and it was like polio just fell away, you know, and nobody thought about it. So I think now we have an expectation that medicine will figure this out, but then we also have to wonder if people will go with that, you know, whether the anti-vaxxers will. etc. So, it's hard to say. Anyway, we digress. Is there anything else that you would like to say about Lone Jack Trail? I think we've covered all the basics here, but did I miss
I
something?
feel like no, I don't think so. I think one of the reasons why I wish that I could be down in the store to sign copies is that the real Lucy has a rubber stamp made of her paw print, where she's able to then sign copies for people, and she's done that with Deception Cove. So next for book 3, when we do this in store, I will bring the stamp, even if I can't bring Lucy, and we'll sign copies that way.
That'll be wonderful. I failed to say that Owen very kindly sent us signed book plates from Vancouver for Lone Jack Trail, which we now have. So if you order a copy from the store, we will provide you with a book plate signed personally by Owen, which is wonderful. So, thank you, dear. It was wonderful to visit with you again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was really nice.
And I want to thank all of you who've taken time to watch our program. There will be a podcast made of it that will be available in a day or two, so you could share that or share the video with your friends and encourage everybody to buy a copy of Lone Jack Trail. And if you haven't read it, go back and read Deception Cove. Oh, look.
Please do. And here's Lucy beseeches you to read Deception Cove and Lone Jack Trail.
I love it. We actually have a bookstore dog called Paul, who is up in the front of the store and was barky. And then we have a new bookstore dog in the back of the store called Maddie, who is a brand new rescue dog
amazing
companion. So, if people can have pets at home, I guess we're going for pets at work, aren't we?
The best bookstores all have bookstore dogs. That's one of the institutions of a good bookstore.
Well, thank you. We're really very fond of ours. Anyway, I'm even hearing thunder, so this might be a more exciting evening than we planned. I know, I love it. So thank you all. Good night.
Yeah, thanks.